I got asked a question, and the question was, for whatever reason, through my level of interpretation and the way my brain works, a very tough one. The question was simply, and I quote, Chael, what is your biggest regret through your MMA career? End quote. All right, well, tough one, because instantly my mind would go to competition. And within what match, what decision making process did you do? I can answer that, but I don't know that it would be what my biggest regret is because that's a moment. That's just a moment in time. And I believe most of my regrets come, and I think this is the parent in me. I got a young man, and whether he follows in my footsteps or he takes something else, but he's going to have something that he is passionate about, and I am going to be nothing more than a chauffeur. I am going to get him to practice, and then I am going to get him home. So the question, as simple as it may sound to you guys, goes a little bit deeper for me. And I came from the school of thought of Clayton Hires, who came from the school of thought of Coach Kenny Adams, who largely ties into the overwhelming school of thought of Dan Gable. Dan Gable, who is one of the most significant figures in the history of American wrestling, has a philosophy of nothing trumps hard work. You can achieve anything athletically if you are willing to work hard enough. Dan Gable is the original athlete to recognize and go on to weaponize pace. He believed you could make a coward out of any man if you can insert fatigue into that man. Now, I don't think any of us disagree with that. I think all of us are probably looking and go, well, yeah, Chael, you kind of just stated the obvious. Okay, yeah, fair part. I did. But somebody had to think of that, right? It's just like why are the tires on your car round instead of squares or rectangles or triangles? Well, because they roll. They roll better. I get it. I'm stating the obvious, but somebody had to think of that. Somebody at some point had to realize that this is a smoother ride than clunk, 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 right? It's just one of those things. The reason I tie that in is because that's what my belief was as well. I was told that in my entire life, from the time I was 9 years old working under Roy Pittman to the time I got into college and I was under Chuck Kearney and Ron Finley and Dean Dixon to the time I ultimately went into MMA and I was under the tutelage of Clayton Hires. We're going to work hard. And when I talk about that, allow me to elaborate and extend. Let's say one of the harder workouts that I have personally ever come across, and the single hardest workout apparatus that I have ever been introduced to, is something called an aerodyne bike. And an aerodyne bike is a stationary bike. It's got a great big fan on the front, and you pedal it as hard as you can. It does a good job of tracking your calories, your time, but most importantly, your RPMs. The first time I ever did an aerodyne workout, I did it with Les Gutches, who was the sitting and reigning world champion. I had never been on one before. Our entire workout was done. It's ready to grab a towel and hit the showers time. Nope, Les has one last thing we're going to do. We're going to do 1 minute on, 1 minute off aerodyne bikes, meaning he goes for a minute, then he gets off. I jump on the bike and go for a minute. I get off. Repeat back and forth. I get 10 reps in. He gets 10 reps in. Rule was real simple. Keep it at 80 RPMs. If you want to go above it, go ahead. If you've got that kind of energy, if it falls to 79 or under, you are failing at your job. Well, I had never done this before. I wasn't intimidated in the least. I'm going to work half the time and I'm going to rest half the time. That sounds like a workout that anybody could do. Well, wrong. It was very trying. It was very troubling. It was very difficult. I went out then and got myself an aerodyne bike and began getting my own workouts on this. But what I will share for you, as difficult as that was, and as much as maybe I'm bragging to you that I got it done. If you've ever tried it, then you would know how hard it is and go, hey, Chael, good job. That sounds like a tough workout. But if I was to take the aerodyne bike, or I was to take running a hill or steps are another very difficult one. You get your lactic acid going, your legs are burning, heart's pumping out of your chest. These are very difficult things, but it comes back to a very simple question, which is, are they practical things? You're getting a good burn, that can't be bad. You're burning calories, that can't be bad. You're showing a mental toughness by doing something that inconveniences you, that can't be bad. How much of that is going to translate into the octagon? Am I ever going to see a bicycle in the octagon, by example? Am I ever going to see anything in there where I get a minute on and a minute off inside of the octagon, by example? Now, I am not frowning on these workouts. I am just suggesting within my own career, I would have used those very specifically as supplemental workouts. There's some exercises that you can do, and nothing bad comes from working out. Every single day, you'll burn some calories. You might get a little bit stronger. You might get a little bit faster. You might get in a little bit better shape. You're definitely going to feel good about yourself and accomplished. It's instant gratification. But I also feel that needs to be its own workout. And then later in the afternoon, you're doing things that are very specific to your sport. Coach Clayton, we used to jump rope a lot. Well, jumping rope served a lot of purposes. First off, it was great for conditioning. I was always having weight issues. It's great for calorie burning. It's also a exercise where you can mentally focus. You have the radio going. Usually you're looking at yourself in the mirror. For some reason, exercising and seeing yourself in the mirror are just a positive thing for motivation. Motivation's tough to come by. But the jump rope was directly applicable to what you're trying to do within your performance inside of the cage. You got to move your feet. You got to be light on your feet. You got to be used to bouncing around so that you're a target that's hard to find while you're getting your own attacks out. And then you got to be light on your feet to bounce in and out and get away. There's a reason that the jump rope can trace itself back to the first boxers ever and all the way to the fighters of today. It's very applicable. And there was a lot of times in my life where I would be the most exhausted guy in the room. People would pay me the cut. Chael, you outworked everybody today. That's a big compliment. And that's something that you're dead set to do. And maybe if your workout wasn't as hard as you thought it was going to be, well, you can make up for it before you hit the shower. Simply go down on a wall and hit a wind sprint to the other side, catch your breath, hit a wind sprint back. I mean, there's ways you can get your heart pounding out of your chest, but you will still then have to ask yourself at any point in that octagon, am I going to be sprinting from one side to the next? So if I was to have any kind of regrets, it would have been that I possibly wasted time and energy selling myself on the idea and the ideology that was instilled in me from the time I was 9 years old, which ultimately came from Dan Gable. But I was a wrestler, so if it was good enough for Gable, it was good enough for all of the wrestlers, but that didn't fully carry over. Would have I been better off, by example, to hit those wind sprints at the end of practice, or would have I been better off to get a partner in front of me, hit an arm drag into a double at full speed, take him down, another guy's standing there waiting, hit an arm drag on him, blast that double, the first guy is now back on his feet, hit that for a double, and hit that for the same amount of minutes? I don't know the answer. I don't come to you with an answer. I come to you with a philosophy and a logic involved that I believe I do have the correct answer, which is to actually have a body, to actually work some of those combinations into those setups. When I tie it back to the first time I ever worked out with George St-Pierre, when it was time to go live, you were going live. You were going as hard as you could. But when it wasn't within that window, he was very slow, and he was very methodical, and he was very meticulous with his movements. I can remember him putting me in a leg lock. To put me in a leg lock, start to finish, is going to take well less than 2 seconds, break, and now it's my turn to do it to him. When he would put me in a leg lock, it would take right around 20 seconds. He would not let go of the hold until his legs were crossed, secured, ankle secured, transition, lock, submission, but he would take his time. And George believed and shared with me that day, and I have taken it with me ever since, that a fight is 25 minutes, and that's it. and he needed to know how hard he could go and at what pace he could go at for 25 minutes. But practice is an hour and 30 minutes. He did not need to know how hard he could go for 90 minutes. So he would pick his spots very meticulously. This is where it's all out. This is where my chest is pounding. This is where I need to have position. This is where I need to have my setups and my attacks. The rest of the time, I am going to do things that are applicable to the competition itself, but I can do it at a slow pace. If I naturally, as a learner, and everybody's mind works differently, George did a good job at a very young age of identifying what worked for him, which was a slow pace. It was doing it meticulous and doing it perfect and getting it right. And then he could speed that up a little bit. And then he could get all of those things, same things achieved, and being technically sound, being proficient, being accurate, mastering a skill, but now all of a sudden he can do it at a full pace. So that was one guy's theory that was not my theory. And so when I'm asked my biggest regret, I do wonder how much time I wasted. I enjoy lifting weights. I don't love working out. I've worked out a lot. I don't love working out. I actually enjoy lifting weights. Now, I will do it the way that you guys can probably relate to, which is you're in a nice air-conditioned gym somewhere. You pump out a few sets. You look at yourself in the mirror. You visit with your workout partner. You take a trip to the water fountain. You come back and pump out a few more sets. But either way, I just enjoyed that. The question you run into in the world of fighting, boxing specifically, and this is a quote by Teddy Atlas, is it bad to lift weights or is it really bad to lift weights? Now, the reason I referenced boxing and Teddy Atlas specifically is because that is a game of speed. And the more muscle you have, the slower that you go. When you start intertangling and intertwining grappling aspects, lifting weights is a very important thing, right? It doesn't always come down to technique. Think of the best wrestler that you know. Who? Chael Sanderson come to mind? One of the Schultz brothers come to mind? Okay, great. How do you think they would have done if they wrestled a gorilla who had no training whatsoever, didn't know what his stance was, didn't know what? How do you think that match would have gone, right? So it's not always about technique. Sometimes brute strength comes into it, but that's from a grappling aspect. So my biggest regret is just and I spent my whole career trying to find it. I knew there was better ways to train. But ultimately, I would always default back to train harder. And most guys that you will hear speak on this will say, train smarter, not harder. Those guys are lazy. Those guys are trying to talk themselves out of doing the difficult things. But that doesn't mean that they don't have a hold of the right tool. They might have a hold of it by the wrong end, but they got a hold of the right tool. They're close. I believed in hard work. I believed in condition. I believed in weaponizing pace, and I believed over everything else. My biggest fear is that when the end of the fight comes, I'm not still around. Physically and mentally, I need to be in there to protect myself, but also to attack and try to score points on my opponent. So I bought into that hard work. But as I do look back, there was a lot of things that I did to work very hard, to get tired, to get exhausted, that were not completely applicable to the task at hand.